Wasabi guys, coming back at y'all with another 10 underrated commander cards. This is going to be the Dominaria edition, where we look at the newest set and see 10 cards that I feel like are already underrated and are something that you should look out for. These may not be overwhelmingly powerful cards, these may not even be powerful cards, but they're definitely going to put their work in, honestly, in whatever deck I think they could fit in. So let's start it off here. The first one is Banality Marshal. Now there are a bunch of creatures, there are a bunch of things that do something similar to this, so why is this underrated? Well, it's because most people probably don't find the value in just stacking up all of these anthems on your board at the same time. There are definitely powerful things that you can do with a commander like Elesh Norn when all you're doing is pumping your stuff up while at the same time hurting your opponent's stuff. While this doesn't give your opponent's creatures -1/-1, it is going to pump up all your other creatures by +1/+1. Very simple, very cheap creature. It's not going to do too much work, but it's always underrated whenever you can pump up your tokens, make them more viable in combat. Not too shabby. Then we have Baird Steward of Argive. I love these sort of ghostly prison propaganda type things where it doesn't even have to be a huge tax, but taxing your opponent 1 generic mana for each creature that they want to attack with is a big deal. Creatures can attack you or a planeswalker you control unless they pay 1 mana for each of those creatures, so it's definitely going to put the pressure on your opponents. The fact that this is a commander option, a legendary creature, I think is pretty sweet. You can make some sort of pillow fort strategy, but there are probably better options throwing him in as one of the 99 in, say, Queen Marchesa, or really any deck where you are susceptible in combat and you're not going to be able to put up as much of a fight. So really good, really awesome, these tax effects, whether it's combat or casting spells, it definitely adds up and it's going to force your opponents to be more careful with what they do with their mana. Next one is Evra Halcyon Witness. Halcyon, I don't know what it is, but it is definitely a really sweet card. And I've had questions at pre-release, people just say, oh, it's not that good. Your life total becomes 4, you could get killed, when they don't realize the fact that you could just swing with this, use the activated ability on the attack, and then once it deals damage, it's going to deal damage equal to your life total that you swapped it with, and it has lifelink, so you're going to gain all that life back, and then some. So the fact that this is a risk at all, I mean, I understand that, but you are definitely going to gain some life back. Now compare this to Serra Avatar, which is very similar in the fact that it can get really massive, and you also realize that this is 7 mana instead of the 6 mana for Halcyon Witness. It doesn't have lifelink, it doesn't really do anything else, has no other keywords for evasion or any sort of way of making herself useful. For the most part, she's just a big creature. This has the potential to get out of hand pretty quickly. If you have any other synergies with life gain, that's almost a guarantee. Then next we have Nough Bond, Dean of Iteration. Now, immediately what I thought of was Inala, Archmage Ritualist. In a very similar way, this set almost tried to really support that deck, but I feel like it kind of failed. Nough Bond is really the only card that I really enjoyed as far as an inclusion to that deck goes, because it's basically Panharmonicon for wizards, and that's really sweet because that's what you want to do in that deck, is get more ETBs. Nough Bond is going to enable your deck even further, make it more viable. The only bad thing is that I wish that this set did for the Commander 2017 wizard deck that the Ixalan block did for the vampire deck, and I definitely would have found a lot more reasons to fall in love with Dominaria, but still a pretty sweet inclusion here. And then we have Josuvas, Lich Knight. Now a lot of people are probably just going to say, well, this is just good creatures, get creatures out, they all have menace, what's the big deal about that? Usually Commander's a little bit more involved and you want to see more involved cards, but when you think about it, that's a lot of power and toughness with menace, so your opponents are really going to have a hard time blocking all those creatures, in addition to Josu, who's a 4/5 menace for 5 mana, and you kick it, you still get your value's worth in power and toughness. So to pay 10 mana, it is pretty expensive, but think of all the zombie decks, or even the potential knight decks that you can come up with that would absolutely love more knights to work with. And even with zombies, you have stuff like the Scarab God that would love playing around with more zombie tokens, so why not? I think he's a perfect inclusion for a couple decks at least in Commander, as opposed to probably not seeing as much play as a lot of people would expect. Overall, I think I'm on board. And then we have Squee the Immortal. I am sick and tired of people just talking so much trash about this guy. He is really powerful, and some people don't see that as a commander, which, I mean, that's fine, I can understand that, but really, Squee the Immortal, Squee Goblin Nabob, whatever one you want to use, they're both amazing in Chaos decks, because they're just renewable resources. You can just keep using them for discard fodder. If you want to sacrifice this one, you can keep recasting it, and obviously people have mentioned there is an infinite combo with food chain where you just keep exiling it. It's going to give you at least one more mana than its CMC. So you can just keep recasting him. You're always going to be floating a mana, so that's going to provide you with infinite mana. And this is obviously going to go into something like Prosh, Skyraider of Care, which most food chain combos are going to deal with Prosh anyway. And the next card is yet another red card, Siege Gang Commander. This is actually a reprint. So strong in Commander. I feel like so many people don't really realize this, but getting 3 goblins on ETB is so abusable in red. Copy a Siege Gang Commander, stuff like Splinter Twin, or you could obviously just go with a Kiki Jiki and pretty much guarantee that you get those 3 on the ETB. But as far as the creatures go, as far as getting numbers for specific amount of mana, 4 creatures for 5 mana is what this guy's going to be in most decks. And when you think about it, a lot of the good red decks, even the budget ones like Zada, Hedron Grinder, that's all you really want is just good numbers. So while keywords may be lacking, you may not have much of anything going for it in combat, what you really want is the actual numbers itself. And it sees play in a ton of decks, which is crazy because it's really not that powerful, but it's just really strong for whatever strategies it happens to fit in. And it works out really well with other cards like Alesha, who really loves bringing back creatures like this that are conveniently power 2 or less. And you of course have the Perforos, God of the Forge decks. Those are always powerful, but it just seems like Siege Gang Commander fits into way too many decks to not really see as much love as it should. So that's definitely why I decided to put it on this list. And the next card is Broken Bond. This one isn't so much powerful as much as I think it's just a good value card in green. Green does something really well. It deals with artifacts and enchantments. Why not play to that strength? While this is basically a sorcery speed naturalize, what you get in return for giving up that timing is the fact that you can put a land card into play from your hand. So you get pretty much an extra land drop there for being able to get rid of an artifact or an enchantment, and it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped. So with green, there are a lot of good land ramp strategies that love getting more lands. If you're looking for any sort of artifact enchantment removal that is going to synergize in any way with getting more lands, there are a bunch of them. There's the Gitrog monster. There's of course probably one I think is going to synergize really well, Omnath Locus of Rage. So I think it's really cool when you can have a card that's kind of dual purposed. It can be really good utility, get rid of something that's problematic, or it could also help you out with your strategy. I think that's also sweet. The next card we have is Song of Frailties. This card is very similar to Cryptolith Rite. Some people would prefer that card over this, but in all honesty, I think that the value you could get out of this card is pretty much the same. When you think about decks that might want to go off with a Cryptolith Rite, if you have a bunch of token creatures, chances are within the first 2 turns you're going to try to combo off anyway. So I really don't see a huge weakness in comparison. I mean, other than the fact that it does trigger the lore counters after your draw step, so that might be a little bit different, but other than that, it's pretty much the same thing until you get to the 3rd lore counter, and then you basically just give your creatures a bunch of good keywords and +1/+1 counters, which I think is a huge added bonus to just a typical token deck. It could definitely help you swing in for the kill. So overall, I think a lot of good token decks that might consider Cryptolith Rite for the fact that you have a bunch of creatures and you don't always know what to do with them, so you might as well make them Birds of Paradise. This is going to do exactly the same thing, at least for the first 2 turns. And then our last card for this underrated list is Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. I don't think I've heard really anyone talk about this. And yes, it does have the restriction of only really being cast if you have a legendary creature or a planeswalker, but most of the time that's going to be the situation you use this anyway. You return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is really sweet because it's any legendary permanent, so any of the permanent types, lands, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, all of those have the potential to be brought back. It is a shame though that this isn't within colors for Muldrotha. That would have been pretty flavorful, but other than that, it's really sweet. And honestly, I would say 5-color planeswalker deck, Super Friends, this is probably going to be a consideration for those, because usually Super Friends decks are public enemy number 1. The goal at the table then becomes, let's try to kill off the planeswalkers so that we can try to beat them. You might as well use this, bring a lot of those planeswalkers back, make it even more difficult for your opponents to get back in the game. That's really the best spot where I think this card is going to fit in, but you could definitely fool around with lands, those other permanent types, see what you can come up with those, but mainly being able to get back planeswalkers from your graveyard I think is really sweet. Definitely worth bringing back awesome planeswalkers like Karn, Teferi, things that would get killed off. just because of their enormous presence in the game. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this list. Let me know what you think about these 10 cards. I definitely believe that these deserve some more recognition as far as Commander goes. But anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.